Jeroen in the Caribbean wants to talk about another atheist that said they didn't go through a proper grieving process. So welcome. You're on with Shannon, Q, and Matt. How are you?
Hello, Matt. Hello, Shannon. First, for the sake of clarity, can we pretend to be on the radio and say over so that we don't speak over each other? Over?
No, I hate that, but let's try to do our best without making it feel like we're in a 50s war movie.
Over.
Okay, very well. I'll do my best. First, let me recapitulate for Shannon. This is a follow-up to a conversation with Matt and I believe Don in October or November of 2019. To make a long story short, I deconverted a person without expecting to, and I was caught off guard by the emotional fallout. Now, later on, I learned that part of that emotional fallout was due to the fact that she had lost a loved one in a very tragic manner, and that until her loss of faith, she had coped with her grief by telling herself that she would see her loved one again in heaven. So when her faith was lost, the grieving process was undone. And I had a very interesting conversation with another atheist about it, and he argued that believers, therefore, do not truly have a grieving process. They don't truly cope with their grief. It's based on a false foundation. But I think that goes a little too far. I wanted to know what you guys think.
Okay, that's interesting to me. And I can see the point, because saying that it's based on a false foundation, depending on your perspective, and everybody's different, could very much be valid, because you're essentially saying that I haven't lost this person. I've basically just kind of misplaced them for a little while. I will be reunited with this person. So that's a way to quell grief by pushing it aside. So you sound like you have a different perspective, and you feel as, because to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this from your perspective, to me, grieving something is knowing that it's gone forever and knowing that you're going to have to deal with the fact that that is lost, that person is lost, that thing is lost, that relationship is lost, and that it's something that you cannot get back. It is no longer accessible to you. So if you believe that at some point in time in the future, it is still going to be accessible to you, then grief isn't necessarily the same, which is, I think, that the point that person was making. You could quell it or you could push it aside. Do you have a different perspective or a different definition of grief?
Well, the analogy I used was basically that a house built on a shaky foundation is still a house. It can collapse, but while it stands, it stands. So, you know, while
I don't understand how that analogy tracks, though. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I interrupted you on purpose just because I don't understand how that analogy tracks.
Yeah, so maybe my analogy is flawed. While they believe, they're fine with it. And if they die believing, then they die being fine with it. But
you're talking about the difference between a treatment that is designed to alleviate the symptoms and cause versus a bandage. So yes, you're right that a house built on sand is still a house, but it's going to crumble. It was a useless house. It was not a stable house, which is what we're looking for. And so the grieving process is one where there are steps that people go through so that they don't have to sit here and be miserable forever. They can move forward with their life, sort of thing. And if you build your grieving process on a fictional scenario, when that's yanked out from underneath you, you can basically be stuck starting all over.
Okay, I understand. So, well, okay, I guess I see the point. And basically, we snowballed into a different conversation. He also asserted that because of this, the God aspect in, like, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous was also a flaw.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. Because if you...
That's the reason I have massive objections to 12-step programs, particularly like Alcoholics Anonymous, because they start with, I'm helpless to do anything. I must find a higher power. And that what it does is it takes, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert, it takes one dependency and replaces it on a dependency with the group, the method, the thing like that. And if you get to a point where the thing that you've surrendered to as your higher power, you find out doesn't exist, then your foundation for sobriety may be at risk. And that's why I prefer other methods. But Shannon knows way more about it than I do.
Yeah, so from a psychological standpoint, if you're tethering your mental state to something that isn't ultimately sustainable and indefinitely sustainable, that to my mind is a huge mistake. So from the Alcoholics Anonymous perspective and tying it back to the grieving perspective, if you're tethering your ability to quell your grief or deal with your addiction to a belief in a deity, and something happens that unravels that belief system for you, then what happens to your mental health that you had tethered, like, or to the components of your mental health that you had tethered to that in order to, perceive yourself as being okay? You're no longer going to be able to be okay because it was that house, like Matt said, that was built on a poor foundation is now collapsing, right? So I would completely agree with that. It seems as though it's more so a temporary placation that works in multiple scenarios because it's also built into an intrinsic societal support system and gives you temporary emotional satiation, as opposed to giving you permanent abilities to deal with the emotional states yourself. You're kind of like outsourcing your emotions, which isn't a healthy way to deal with any sort of emotional conflict or addiction or grief.
I'm curious,
if that's your one pillar that you're tied to. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I'm curious though, Jeroen. So you were talking with another atheist who talked about how they didn't feel that they'd grieved properly because it was based in belief that now no longer exists. And I'm assuming that they went on to perhaps find another way to grieve. What was your point of disagreement with them?
Interesting.
Because at the end of the day, setting aside everything, at the end of the day, setting aside everything we know about psychology and other stuff, all that really happened is somebody told you that they didn't think and they didn't feel that they had a good foundation for their grief because of belief, and now they're working on a better one. So what's the objection?
Oh no, I didn't actually. I knew better than to disagree with the person, with the person, because this is the person that I converted by accident, and there was a lot of anger there. She saw it as a waste of time. That she wasted a lot of time grieving improperly. But I said, that's interesting. I didn't actually argue with her. I mean, I have Asperger's, but through the school of hard knocks, I learned that I, at times just need to shut up. No, the disagreement was when I discussed it with another atheist, and they said, well, yeah, I can understand the anger. And then this third atheist, made the allusion to Alcoholics Anonymous and how that was also not a proper way. And I guess you guys explained it very well, better than he did. I think I get it now. So thank you. And I will let you guys go to the other callers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeroen. Appreciate
the fruitful conversation.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, there we go. First call. You feeling okay, Shannon? Do we need to slow down for you? Are you, because you feel like you're going full speed and I don't want to stop you.
No, I'm good. I don't understand what's happening.
I'm just messing with you because you're like, I'm not sure if I got my A game, and then you come in and you completely fucking own a call, which is awesome.
Okay, now I'm getting.
So,
apparently, I am slow. See, look.
You're only slow with me. With the callers, you're doing phenomenal.